David, always good to talk to you. I know you're already in Tampa, the convention just 3 days away. I'm sure things are really starting to get real busy down there.
Yeah, we were down here, Jenny, for the platform hearing, not hearings, but for the platform committee meetings and the subcommittee meetings, because, as you know, there are important segments of the Republican platform that affect the party's position on Second Amendment rights. And so there were a number of NRA people down here working the platform committee. And, of course, we have friends on that committee and among the delegates as a whole. And the 2008 platform of the Republican Party was perhaps the most gun-friendly platform that any party had ever adopted. And I'm happy to be able to report that this year's Republican platform is even stronger in terms of dedicating a major party to the protection of the Second Amendment.
Wow, that's good news, I'm sure, for everybody out there. And when you look at the fact, David, with the increase in gun sales we've had that continue, more and more women are getting into the sport, becoming gun owners. The gun owners' vote is very important, and you can tell because you got, the VP, Paul Ryan, out there talking about President Obama, taking him on, saying, you know what, I'm a Catholic deer hunter, and I'm happy to cling to my guns and my religion.
That's exactly right. And a lot of these political figures are beginning to realize not just how important the gun issue is in terms of elections. They've known that for some time, but they're beginning to appreciate the size of the Second Amendment vote. Mm-hmm. The pollsters for Scott Walker in Wisconsin, after that recall election, attributed the entire margin of his election. And remember, it was supposed to be very close, and then it wasn't so close, to the activities of the NRA and gun owners in that state. As you go around the country, in state after state, we're in a position where if gun owners get out and vote this fall, they can make a real difference. Remember, Ginny, back in 2000, Bill Clinton said we cost Al Gore 5 states. This time we could do the same thing, but it's going to require gun owners to get out and vote and to get those they run into in the range, at the sporting goods store, and elsewhere to do the same thing. The Obama people know this. Yeah. And the one group that he does not want to activate are people who believe in the Second Amendment, which is why he sounded so mealy-mouthed on these things in recent days. But don't hesitate for a moment to realize that if this guy gets a second term, if he appoints people to the Supreme Court and to the lower courts, and if he has a chance by regulation and executive order or an opportunity to go back to the UN and get the gun treaty that he was unwilling to bring forth this time because he didn't want it on the table before the election, he'll do all these things and will suffer.
And as you said, the size of the vote and also the fact gun owners have proven election after election, they turn out in force at the polls.
That's exactly right. Consider these numbers, Jenny. There's a well-known poll done in Washington by Republican and Democratic pollsters called the Battleground Survey. And in the last survey, they included a question on the poll asking people whether they lived in a gun-owning household or not. Now, in those kinds of polls, the actual numbers that come out are understated because a lot of gun owners won't say whether they have guns in their home or not. But what they found was that in households headed by people 30 or over, in every age category, a majority of householders were gun owners. And when they looked into the other poll questions and cross-tabbed them with gun-owning households, they found that there was, just for an example, at that time and now, Romney and Obama are running roughly even in the national polls. Among gun-owning households, when this poll was taken, Romney was winning 2-1. In non-gun-owning households, Obama was winning almost 2-1, which tells you the difference. That, as the pollster said, it's obvious that gun owners get it because they're concerned about the issues that are driving this country. They're concerned about guns. They're concerned about the economy. They're concerned about jobs. And if they vote, the outcome is going to be relatively clear in November. But it's up to gun owners. It's up to believers in the Second Amendment to get out and spend the next few months, next few weeks, the next couple of months doing the work that we know can make the difference in terms of the direction of this country.
Dave, as you said, this race couldn't be any closer. But what do you think is the biggest challenge going into this convention for Romney?
Well, a national convention gives a candidate an opportunity to introduce or reintroduce himself to the public whose votes he's going to be seeking after the convention ends. Mitt Romney and Paul Ryan will have an opportunity next week, I should say, to speak directly to the American people. Millions of people will be watching them, and they want to know that it's okay to vote for them as opposed to the fellow that's in the White House. They already, I think a majority of Americans would like to fire Barack Obama, but they have to be assured that it's okay to fire him. That's what happened in the Reagan-Carter race back in 1980, which broke at the end because it took Americans a while to realize that, yeah, we can do this. We can vote for this fellow Reagan. We don't have to rehire Jimmy Carter. And I think where the Republicans are now is in that same situation this year, where voters are looking at Obama and say, you know, we'd like to fire the guy. Mm-hmm. Is it going to be okay to elect these fellows in his place? That's the question that they have to answer, and I think that they will be able to answer that question this year at this convention and in the days following.
You know, you look at all the pollsters and they're talking about, hey, you know what, people need to get to know Romney better, and this is a great shot for him to say, this is who I am.
That's what the convention provides a candidate the opportunity to do, and smart candidates, and Lord knows he's a smart candidate, do exactly that.
You know, the networks have already announced they're only going to be covering 1 hour a night of the conventions, but do you have any doubt you're going to see the social media playing an even bigger role than they have in the past?
Well, that's what we've been moving to in politics, and certainly in terms of the conventions, because even though the major media, as we call it, the networks, are not going to be giving the kind of coverage that we might like to see, that coverage is going to be available to people through other channels. If I had a wish, it would be that that the networks would cover live Mrs. Romney's speech, mm-hmm. because she's an incredible woman who speaks very well, and I think is a great asset to her husband and to his ticket. But the networks have all announced they're not going to carry that speech.
Everybody's talking about Tropical Storm Isaac, concerned that it's going to hit Tampa right during the convention. Your thoughts on how that might affect turnout?
Well, people that want to get into better hotels are hoping that there'll be enough threats that some people will stay home and cancel out so they can get better rooms. But, you know, the convention's going to go on. It's going to take place, and all of those things are going to happen. No one really knows whether the hurricane is going to be a real threat here. Obviously, there's going to be a couple of rainy days. But I'll tell you something. In Tampa in August, there are always a couple of rainy days. Yeah.
What do you make of Vice President Biden planning to show up in Tampa?
You know, maybe nobody else will have him.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this is think about this.
Talk about desperation.
The Democratic Party is a party who questions the capability of Paul Ryan, one of the brightest members of the House of Representatives, one of the few people in American politics who has said not only do we have a crisis, but we have an obligation to deal with it. And yet they have a vice president who can't keep his years straight, his centuries straight, and is willing to lower himself to the basis of charges against his opponents with no regard for the truth or indeed for anything approaching manners. This guy is a joke. And maybe he's coming down here because the president and his people just as soon not have him in Washington.
Well, and you know what? He's also doesn't know where he is half the time, so maybe he won't show up because he won't be able to find his way there.
That's right. He may land in Charlotte and think it's Tampa.
Stay tuned, right? But, you know, you've been a lot of these conventions. How does this stack up as far as importance when it comes to what's really at stake?
I think it's very important because of what's at stake. The fact is that this is probably the most important election of our lifetime. It's certainly true for believers in the Second Amendment, and that makes this convention incredibly important because of the stakes. I think that this convention can work very well for the Romney-Ryan ticket for the simple reason that right now they're even with an incumbent president. That's a unique position to be in this early. Remember, when Ronald Reagan was challenging Jimmy Carter, at this stage, he was down by 17 or 18 points. So therefore, the convention could get you up a little bit, but you were going to have to make the rest of that climb on your own during the campaign. In this instance, if this convention gives the Romney-Ryan ticket a few points bounce and they're able to sustain that,
Absolutely.
it could make all the difference. And that means the stakes here in Tampa are very high.